Welcome back to Ferrigno Freedom Channel. I'm Dante Ferrigno, and I am here to talk to you today about my experiment with 3 days a week fasting while on a carnivore diet. You know, I've seen a lot of YouTubers talking about this before. Some of them don't talk about it in the context of a carnivore diet. Some do. Some of the ones that do have a carnivore diet say fasting is great. Some of them don't. Some of the ones who don't do a carnivore diet say fasting is great. Some of them don't. Most of the time I notice that it seems to be about whether or not it should be done with carnivore way of eating. And I don't understand why it would be narrowed down to only that, but there's a couple of influencers out there that have talked about it being bad for muscle loss and things like that. So these are some of the things I was wanting to investigate when I started this path of trying out fasting, and I've been doing it for 8 weeks. I just finished my last fast the day before yesterday, so I'm coming here to talk about it. I'm also wrapping up some more ribeyes because thankfully it's the holiday season and Publix is running their Christmas special on rib roasts again for $6.99 a pound. So this has been my 8th trip to buy 2 whole rib roasts cut into bone-in ribeyes. Sure makes it nice to have good meat like this when you're breaking a fast. Heck, it's nice to have good meat like this anytime. But I also wanted to check and see some things that I'd heard other influencers talking about with regard to loose skin and troubled fat areas being something you can work on with rolling fasts like this. And I also wanted to look at something that I was listening to Dr. Boz talking about. She has this thing called the Boz ratio, where it compares the glucose to ketones, and when you're at a certain ratio, you're in a very high state of healing, she talked about. So I wanted to kind of see what kind of differences I could notice if I was hitting some of those numbers. I've been tracking my blood glucose and my ketone levels with a Keto Mojo test meter that measures both on the same device. It has 2 different strips, one for glucose and one for ketones. And I've been tracking all of my numbers, and I've noticed that when I'm hitting those Boz ratio numbers, that it matches also something called the GKI, the glucose ketone index, which gives you a true idea of what level of ketosis you're in. And whenever I've been in a good level of ketosis, I have felt more rejuvenated, more excited. I don't know, it's like everything feels like it's a little bit better, and it's like mental clarity that comes that I don't notice, that I noticed less of when I wasn't in ketosis. I also tended to have more energy, I noticed, when I was in ketosis. There's been a few things that I've noticed in general as far as my overall wellness goes that I'll talk about here too. But first, let's take a look at the numbers.
All right, so as far as the glucose numbers go and ketone numbers, let's take a look at my readings over the past few months. So back on October 17th, before I started fasting, let's see, my glucose level here was 86 and my ketone level was 0.2. So my glucose wasn't all that high, but my ketones, I was not in ketosis. I was not in ketosis the following check at 0.3, nor the following check when I was at 0.4. Those were all done on that Tuesday. Then I checked again on Tuesday, still not in ketosis. Still not in ketosis. Glucose level was 90. Yeah, no ketosis going on at all that first day. So I checked a lot that first day. And then on Wednesday, I was still not in ketosis. I was hitting glucose numbers in the 90s, 97, 90. And I was eating normal here, you know, a ribeye or 2 every day. I usually eat about 2 pounds of meat on average, sometimes less, sometimes more. Then I didn't check for a few days. And then I came back, and I think this is around where I started eating this way. I think I had that first date wrong, the 17th. It was actually a little later than that. It was more like the 19th or 20th. But on this day, on Sunday, my glucose was 55, and then my ketones were 0.6 later in that day. Looks like I checked a couple of times close to each other here. Yeah, earlier in that day, the glucose was 66. It's really hard to get it to stop on the numbers I want it to stop on. But no ketosis until Monday, which would have been the first day after fasting. Monday would have been the first day after fasting, so that was my first time seeing my ketone levels rise. Then I checked the following week. Looks like I only got glucose numbers here on November 1st. My glucose was 87, and then on the November 2nd, my glucose was 73, and my ketones were 0.6. Friday morning, my glucose was 82. Ketones were way down below 0.4, it looks like. Let's see if it shows. Yeah, 0.5, so I was barely in ketosis there. And then Friday afternoon, I was not in ketosis still, so my body hadn't adjusted to any of this yet. Then the following Friday, this was the day after, this was the first day of fasting again. Glucose down to 80, and this is a evening check. Ketones were 1.3. Saturday morning, ketones were 2.3. Glucose was 63. So in a high state of ketosis there. Following day, glucose was 61. Or Saturday at a little after noon, glucose was 61, ketones were 3.9. That was the highest I had ever checked. Let's see, that was on a Saturday. So that was into one of my fasts right there. Glucose was 51 on Saturday evening. Ketosis level 2.0 on ketones. And then the day after that, let's see, later that evening, still in ketosis at 2. Glucose was 70. Looks like the afternoon. I don't know. Oh, you can spread this out. Well, that makes it a lot easier. Let's see, that was Sunday morning. My ketones were at 2.3. Now, this is the day I break my fast. So I'd expect to see this number go up a little bit. Glucose was at 70. Ketones were at 2.3. That afternoon, ketones were at 5.2. I didn't think that was even possible. And my glucose was down to 52. So this was still fasting at this point. And then after eating, my glucose went up to 67. Ketones went down to 3.1. A little later, they were still rising on ketones, which is surprising, to 3.5. Glucose was at 68. Wednesday morning, early Wednesday morning, 5 a.m., ketones were at 1.1, but my blood glucose was at 96, feeling the dawn effect there. 1.8 on ketones the following Friday. This would be the first day into my fast, not fully 24 hours in because this was taken in the afternoon. Although I could have started early in the day because I did a lot of them early in the day. I did a lot of them late in the day too, though. Let's see, Saturday, good ketosis level, good blood sugar level. Later Saturday, glucose way down, ketones way up, 4.1 on the ketones, 39 on the glucose. A lot of you I know are going to say that that glucose level that low is going to be dangerous because you don't have enough glucose to operate. Ketones give you energy too. Being in ketosis makes all the difference when you don't have some sort of diabetic problem where you have to worry about ketoacidosis. That's a whole nother video, and I'm not an expert on it. So Sunday morning, my ketones were at 4.6. This is the day I break my fast. Ketones were, or blood sugar was down to 43 that morning. And checked again later that morning, ketones were still 4.9 and 65 on the glucose. Then this, I'm assuming, is just before eating or after eating. I was 3.9 on the ketones. No. 3.9 on the ketones. I guess that's not the same day. Nope, 76 on the glucose. And then after eating, dropped my ketones down to 1.5. Glucose went up to 91. So what was expected to happen when you eat after fasting? I didn't take measurements for an entire week except one glucose check or ketone check here, it looks like, on Sunday, November 18th. The following week, you can see at the beginning here on the Wednesday, the ketones were at 1.0 and glucose was at 91. Then on Thursday, dropped way down on the ketones. Glucose was a little higher. This was during the dawn effect or shortly after. Friday, around the same time, not in ketosis, 109 on the glucose. Now, this was after Thanksgiving when I made the mistake or made the bad decision is a better way to look at it because I accept my decisions and live with the consequences. I had 3 pieces of pie after having steak for breakfast and for lunch on Thanksgiving Day. And then I just made a bad choice. Got back on the horse after that, but I suffered for 9 days. You'll see the numbers were a lot lower in general. Saturday morning, starting to climb back into ketosis, still got a lot of blood sugar. Saturday evening, way out of ketosis, blood sugar is even higher. This would be a fasting day. Sunday, still glucose is up, ketones not in ketosis. Checked again shortly after that, still on Sunday morning, 98 glucose, 0.4 on the ketones, so I was still dragging even though I was in my fasting period. And then Sunday in the evening, my glucose went way down to 74, which isn't terribly low, but I mean, it was a good drop. And my ketone level rose. It seemed to respond well to me eating meat after my fast. Initially, that's not terribly high, but it's a lot higher than it was shortly after eating that way. But you know, we were seeing numbers like 3 and 4 plus. Now we're going to be seeing numbers in the 1 range up until the Friday afterwards. So 7 days afterward, my ketones started to recover. My glucose started to recover also. You can see where up until Friday, the glucose levels were higher throughout the week. The ketone levels were lower throughout the week. And then all of a sudden, with the fasting period, my ketone levels shot back up into their normal ranges. My glucose levels, though, were still hitting 80s and 90s. Looks like these are, let me see here. This would be, that's a morning number, so that's not too terribly unusual. That's a morning number. But I was still hitting great ketosis, even though I was having the dawn effect. So even though I felt it for 9 days, 7 days, it really shows up strong in the numbers chart here. And then last week, December 5th through December 12th, started to show, let's see, numbers for the evening on Tuesday. 90 in the glucose, which is a little high for the evening, but still in good state of ketosis, which is kind of remarkable. And then later that evening, I noticed the glucose had dropped down because I'd probably eaten later in the day that day, and that's why my glucose numbers were still high. Now they're starting to come back into normal here. It's right at the 9 days point or 8 days point, and it looks like my numbers are recovering quite well. Ketosis. The following morning, I was in a decent state of ketosis, even with 95 glucose, feeling the dawn effect there. Wednesday evening, still in ketosis. So I was back in ketosis after that point of about 9 days or 8 days on after Thanksgiving. So Friday, we're back at the beginning of another cycle here of being on fasting. Glucose was at 83 in the evening. Ketones were 2.0. I believe I ate fairly late in the day that day, so to be at 2.0 in ketosis was great. The following morning, you could see the difference in processing food through the night and the dawn effect being in effect here at 6:23 in the morning. Ketones were 1.5, glucose was 82. I ran out of keto strips, so I just measured my glucose on these days. 76 on Saturday morning, which was great for the dawn effect. 80 on Sunday morning, great for the dawn effect still, and still in a state of fasting. And then in my final week, you can see I stayed in good levels of ketosis throughout most of the week, except for the dawn effect. Even in the evening, I was in a trace state of ketosis after one of my feasting days. So it's good to see that the numbers are recovering. By the following night, I was in a good state of ketosis, and then I was back out again. It was interesting to see these pop back and forth. But for the most part, it's these big numbers of 2.2, 3.3, 3.9. I forget, I think there was 1.5 in there somewhere where I hit just a ridiculously high number of ketosis. Yeah, look at that. Sunday, November 11th, my ketones hit 4.9. Like I say, I didn't even think you could get ketone levels as high as 4.9. So just the fact that I'm hitting ketosis like I am, when I know from when I was doing the Atkins diet back in the 2000s, I used to check my ketone levels all the time. Now, back then I used urine test strips for ketones rather than blood test strips like I'm using now. So it may not have been as accurate, but I was often in trace. I was happy if I was in small, because small level of ketosis was about as dark as it ever got for me when it comes to turning purple on the strip. But a lot of times I wasn't in ketosis, but I was still losing weight. And I had to push my carbohydrate intake down below 20 grams per day to hit ketosis. Now here I am fasting, so I'm cutting out all intake altogether, and I'm not producing any new glucose from food that I'm ingesting, except for what's remaining in my intestines at that time. So after about 2 to 3 days, you really start to see those numbers increase. What I would like to see on a future test is what it would be like tracking these numbers on a 7-day fast, because overall, I can see where fasting helped me jumpstart my ketosis, get my body back into a good state of healing mitochondrial and cellular damage that's been done from 48 years of eating the wrong things. But for now, I wanted to at least start with this 8-week challenge that Dr. Boz puts out to a lot of her patients and people that she talks to on her YouTube channel and her social media. I've done the challenge and I can see the ketosis. I can feel the effects. The question is, does fasting do the other things that they're slated to do, like loose skin and hard to reach fat areas? We'll take a look at that in a moment.
As far as my glucose numbers have improved or changed, I would say that while I was fasting, they were significantly better than they were when I wasn't fasting. Even on the periods in between fasts, I was hitting lower glucose numbers and hitting higher ketone level numbers, which if they work the way that Dr. Boz and other doctors say they do, they have a very healing power for your mitochondria, which makes your cells, your body on the cellular level, much more healthy, because the mitochondria is the powerhouse for your cells. And when that's weak or dying and not getting the energy it needs from things like glucose, maybe because of insulin resistance, which I'm sure I had, if not a lot of, a touch of insulin resistance, and I may even still be suffering from the effects of insulin resistance, as I notice my numbers still hit around that 90 range fairly regularly during the day and the 80s fairly regularly during the evening when I'm toward the end of my eating period, or like right now where I've just finished a fast 2 days ago and my numbers are pretty much the same as they were before. But one thing I can say that changed is when I first started doing Lion Diet, one of the immediate results that I saw, I don't remember how soon after I started, but it was very close to the beginning, where I was an insomniac and I could not sleep at nights. I couldn't get up in the morning either. And when I did, I had constipation and a lot of other issues going on at the same time. But one of the very first things I noticed is that not only did my constipation go away quickly, but also my sleep got so much better. Better than it has been my entire life. Never do I remember a time when I could just lay down and go right to sleep. But I started doing that very early when I started doing Lion Diet. And when I would wake up in the morning, it would feel like I had something had opened my eyes even before I woke up and I was just ready to go. After 2 years, I noticed that that started to change a little bit. Now, it could be because I was extremely active toward the end of 2022, and because of some pain I was in my back, that I wasn't able to be as active in 2023, that maybe that lack of activity changed my sleep needs. But I also was working a swing shift job, so I mean, there's a number of factors that come into play. But I can tell you this, the past week or so, toward the end of all of these fasting periods, I started noticing that I was waking up a lot easier in the morning, and I was also not remembering going to sleep, which means that usually it's because I had just rolled over to go to sleep and went right to sleep. I haven't felt as refreshed when waking up over the past year as I did when I first started doing this and just recently. So that's been a very big improvement, because I hate not being able to just jump out of bed and be ready to go like I was when I first started doing this, because that was such a big benefit. Being able to get up and go is so important. And that changed on Lion Diet, and it improved during this fast period. So overall, when it comes to what the ketones could have done, to what reducing the amount of glucose could have done, you know, those are going to be deep level benefits. I will say that my family has been sick off and on the entire cold season this year, and I have not gotten sick once. I have some seasonal allergies still, but I've had those all along. The big difference now is I don't take any allergy medicine for it. I don't have as bad of an allergy to feel like I need to take medicine. And if I don't need to take medicine, you can bet I ain't taking medicine. It's hard just to convince me that I need medicine. So as far as my overall health and well-being, it has improved because of fasting. Now, when it gets down to the things that a lot of people, whether they want to admit it or not, are looking for, is what did it do for fat loss? What did it do for loose skin? And this is an area where I don't feel like it did as much as I would like. And I'll go ahead and show you how it started, how it looked a couple of weeks in, and then also how it looked at the end on my waist area, because that is definitely where I tend to retain any extra fat in my body. And I know a lot of people say that you need to have a little fat on your body, and I'm not saying I don't want to have any fat on my body. I just don't want any on my love handles area as much. But I guess in my case, that might mean that I wouldn't have any fat on my body. And your body needs a little fat to use for backup energy. Your body needs to have a little fat in case you get in a situation where you can't eat and you need to be able to use some stored energy. It's just one of those things that I'd like to be able to attain. And I'm not so sure that using fasting to reduce all of those things has been as effective as we've been led to believe.
All right, now let's take a look at some of these images that I took of my waist area. I took a front and a side shot the first couple of weeks, and then I said, well, I'll just wait till the end because it's like checking the scale all the time. Checking the scale can be deceptive, and I didn't want to talk myself out of doing this because I wasn't seeing the results I wanted early, which is something very easy to do when you're checking numbers and things way too often. You've got to keep your numbers to a reasonable amount, because if you're checking your measurements every day and something gets larger that you didn't want to get larger, or something gets smaller that you didn't want to get smaller, which that's not usually the case, but it can happen, but you can get upset. You can get bothered by it, and it can be just enough of an emotional tool to make you say, screw it. I'm just going to eat whatever I want. I'm not going to mess around with this stuff. It ain't working, and I don't want to do it. But you're not going to find out if you don't give it a good long try. So what I did here on the first day, this was the front shot, and this was the side shot. You know, I don't like showing you these things. These are not my favorite images to show, but you can see where I was. There's a front look. There's a side look. So I've put a little bit of fat around my waist again. Not nearly as bad as it used to be. And it has come down with the fasting. As a matter of fact, I think I was 196, 197 here. But right now, as of this morning, I was 187. So I am down 10 pounds over this 8-week period of fasting. It's just you take a look at the images and tell me if they look like a big difference to you. Now, I did notice in my first week after doing this that I had a significantly tighter abdominal area, especially at the top. As you can see, my abs are showing a little bit there. So I got a little bit excited because that's getting closer to the way my body looked when I took those pictures back in January that you see at the beginning of all my videos. I mean, that was the best I've ever looked in my life, so I'm proud of that. But I also like to be able to show what it did for me. I mean, this is the first time in my life I'd ever hit a waist area where I could see the features of my abdominal muscles. That to me is exciting enough alone. If I could get a washboard stomach, I mean, that's something I've always wanted. Is it that important to me? It's not terribly important, but it is something that I would like to do. And I'm going to be trying some things in the near future that are supposed to really help with fat burning, and we'll see how those tests go too. But meanwhile, in the first week, I felt like it was showing some real signs of progress. You can see the side view here was about the same as the previous side view, maybe a little less. It's kind of hard to tell. Yeah, it's a lot less pooched out in the love handle area. A little bit smaller lump in the front. And then the final week, I took a side shot here. Now, I probably should have not had jeans on, but I guess I'm just trying to be careful with the people watching this on YouTube. I'm certain there's some things you just don't want to see. So sometimes I'm a little modest, but I was covering up here and it kind of hides it a little bit. But when you compare it to the first side shot, significantly smaller in that front belly area. slightly smaller in the love handles. That might be pushed up a little bit by the jeans, though, making that look even larger than it is. Because here I got jeans pushing up in the front, but I don't have as much pooching out in the front as I do here. So it does look like I got rid of a little bit of that fat that I was looking to target, but still really not as much as I would like to have seen. And here's a look at the front shot of that. And we'll compare that again to the front shot from day one. There's day one. Well, really, this was probably after a few days in. And there's after 8 weeks. Just not as big of a difference as I'd like to have seen. And then there's also just the, in general, issue with loose skin. As you can see, I've got some of the loose skin issues there where I'm pointing. And I don't really notice much of a difference there either. Again, we'll look at week 1 and see if we see. I mean, as a matter of fact, it looks like it might be worse in week 8 than it does at week 1, but it might be just because my belt is pushing up the skin in that area. But it's hard to kind of see the loose skin. You can just see the fat that I still have accumulated in those areas. So all in all, when it comes to the fat loss and the loose skin tightening, 8 weeks of rolling 3-day fast didn't seem to do as much as I would like to have seen for the amount of effort that I put into this.
I don't mind doing all this experimenting on myself. I do wish I had a better way to measure the results, you know, with the blood tests and all that stuff. But sometimes that's just not always financially feasible. If there are any doctors out there who would love to do some testing on what Carnivore does, but you're not requesting any testing, you just let me do the things that I'm gonna do, so you're not asking me to do these things, but if you're willing to do the measurements and try to come up with the answers as to how this is affecting my health, I'd love to hear from you. I don't mind being a guinea pig, doing something I'm gonna do anyway. Maybe if I was a little better at this science stuff, I'd have had the way to know how to check the looseness, I guess, of my skin beforehand. But I looked at it this way when I started. If it didn't make a noticeable, visible difference, then it didn't make enough of a difference, especially for 8 weeks of trying this. But you guys be the judges on what you saw there. I tend to want to see loss where there may not be loss. It's hard to be unbiased when you're looking at your own images, but I do know that I was able to get rid of most of that before, and I would love for my body to get used to it being that way again, because when I was down to my lowest at 176, it just felt right. I liked the way my body felt 100% for the first time in my life. I don't remember ever feeling that way, and I want to see if it's something that I can maintain. If it's not, I can live with that. I'm happy with the way things have come out. I still am in the best shape of my life. Overall, I feel fantastic. I know I didn't have any muscle loss. I mean, I am solid as a rock, y'all. If there is any muscle loss to be seen, and I didn't work out every day. I did work out almost every day that I fasted, but I didn't work out every day, and I didn't work out 5 or 6 days a week consistently either. I just did as many push-ups and curls as I could do in one back and forth like HIIT HIIT type of exercise form, where I would do the curls and then I would go and do the push-ups immediately, and then I would come right back to curls and do some more push-ups until I was like so out of breath that I had to stop for about 60 seconds, and then I would go back at it one more time at the very least. Sometimes I would do 3, sometimes I would do 4 sets, sometimes I would do 5 sets, but I was always doing them until I couldn't do any more. And when I was done, I felt so solid. I felt really good. Like I could tell that it was making a big difference. And then the following day, I would notice the difference. Then on the alternating days, I was doing squats. I was doing it as many as 100 at a time. I stopped counting at some point because I was like, I don't even want to be counting this whole time. So I just go until I can't do anymore. And then I was also doing my shoulder presses with the dumbbells. So I would go from squats to shoulder presses, back to squats, back to shoulder presses. I know there's other exercises I'd like to work in, but so far, that's all I've done. And all I can tell you is what I've actually done. I don't need to be trying to come up with all the exercises I wish I had done, or I had time to do, or I didn't make excuses not to do. but it is what it is. And I have maintained excellent muscle mass. I haven't lost any that I can tell. Even in my pecs, I can feel the difference in what I've put on in the last 8 weeks, just making sure that I'm doing these exercises. One of the things I do hope to try to do soon is sprinting. There's a couple of different doctors on YouTube, some that are carnivore, some that I'm not sure if they're carnivore, but I'm pretty sure they're at the very least low carb or keto. And they talk about how important sprinting is for it being something that, one, comes natural to humans, that would be, say, chasing down their own food. If we were in a tribal situation and we had to hunt our own food, you know, we might be using weapons that aren't as powerful as what we would be using today, like the rifle or the crossbow, and able to take things down at a great distance. We may have to get up close to animals who move pretty quick to be able to take down something to eat. And since that's such a natural part of what our body does, I thought, you know, that does make sense. I like the idea of eating in an ancestrally appropriate diet, even though I don't always agree with what people think that means, because I personally don't subscribe to the idea that humans have been here for hundreds of thousands of years. I think there's some misjudgment going on in that science. But hey, if you believe that, that's fine. I'm not here to try to correct your beliefs on that. And I think that even in biblical times, meat was promoted as a way of eating. Now, the Bible talks about eating vegetables and it talks about eating meat. But when it comes to today, I think our meat is about as natural as it can be. Although in some cases it may not be too natural, because some of these places that raise their meat, who knows what they're doing. But comparatively, it hasn't been genetically altered like a lot of our vegetables and fruits has. It doesn't have as much issue with pesticides and bioengineering and chemicals being involved in the process. And again, that depends on where it's being processed. But the fact is, especially when it comes to beef and ruminants, because the body of that animal is able to pull those toxins out of that food, it's still as pure, and I'd say it's the closest thing we have to pure and healthy natural food that there is. But our vegetables have been Frankensteined. I mean, they're not what they used to be. Neither are our fruits. They're designed to stay on the shelves for weeks longer than they should be able to stay ripe. They're designed to ripen in transit. They're sprayed with things to ripen them in transit or to prevent them from ripening in transit. Just depends on what their goal is. They've crossbred all of our fruits to make them sweeter, and our vegetables too, so that they're higher in carbohydrates. That way we're getting more energy from our food, but carbohydrates is not what our bodies crave. It sure isn't what my body craves. My body craves delicious meat and fat, and it has changed everything. So I eat ancestrally appropriate, in my opinion, with the knowledge that I have about history and physiology. You may not agree with what I think about it, but I'm doing the best I can to use what has given me a second chance at life to make sure I don't lose what I just won back. I eat ancestrally appropriate, and I want to get my exercise in the ancestrally appropriate way, because I think that that's the best way for us to live natural, healthy life. I try to walk. I don't put a whole lot of stock in some of the things that I hear with regard to grounding and earthing, but I still walk barefoot outside as often as I can, because I can't help but think that my feet were meant to feel the earth the way it's supposed to feel. And maybe walking on tile all the time isn't the best choice for my feet. So I do things like that because I want to be as natural as possible. One of the big reasons why is you don't have to buy a lot of products and stuff. I mean, everything in life requires some products and stuff, but the beauty of living and eating this way and exercising this way is you don't have to spend a lot of extra money on anything. You're just spending money mostly on your food. And if you can get it on sale, stock up when you can, just like I've done with multiple visits on this special for Publix. We got to take advantage of these special prices in these times, folks, if we want to be able to do this way of eating and really make it. The one last thing I want to talk about with regard to fasting is there are some psychological, if not also spiritual benefits to it. It depends on how you read the Bible if you're a Christian, or if you just want to look at it as disciplining yourself to say no to something you normally would say yes to, just because you want to be able to tell your body, you do what I want you to do. So whichever perspective you want to look at that from, I think that it's something that the Lord Jesus Christ did, and many of the apostles did, and the prophets did, because it wasn't only beneficial between them and the Lord, but it was good for their self-control. It was good for their mental status. It was good to have a refreshing of the body, a cleaning out of all the stuff that might have been there that's been hanging around for a while. So there's physical and there's spiritual or mental benefits that I think come from fasting too. Sometimes when I do fasting, because I'm a Christian and the Bible talks about fasting, it's supposed to be between you and the Lord. Don't make an issue of it. Don't point it out to everybody. It's kind of hard for me to avoid that when I'm doing it for health reasons like this. But occasionally I do have a 1 or a 2 or a 3 day fast where it's just between me and the Lord. I haven't gone beyond 3 yet. I have done 4-day fasts for the health purposes, but that's my take on that. And as much as it's not fun when you love to eat wonderful steak, when you love to know that what you're eating is doing your body good, it's hard to want to fast. But I think there are benefits that come from it for your overall health, for your cellular regeneration, for the ability to get into ketosis better, where your body can do some of that healing that it needs from years of being insulin resistant and loaded up with sugar and loaded up with all kind of triglycerides and things that you get out of your system when you do a carnivore way of eating, but you can still get some back in, especially if you're having stuff you shouldn't be having. And earlier this year, I talked about how I was eating food from a restaurant that was making the steaks for me with just salt, but they didn't tell me when I asked them if they used any vegetable oils on the steak that they were using a vegetable oil on the grill. And I think that had an effect on me throughout this year. I don't know for certain exactly what the causal relationship is between the things that happened this year and the effects that I felt, but 2023 was quite different. I feel like this reset that I've done through these 8 weeks of fasting has been definitely a positive step, and I would certainly do it again. I don't know that I'm going to do it again anytime real soon, but at least once every 6 months, maybe doing an 8-week set like this, or maybe just getting to where it's once every couple of weeks or once a month even, can be beneficial. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the whole process and situation. I know there was a few of you out there who have hated this journey I've been on for fasting. I'm sorry I've been boring you with this fasting stuff if it's been something that you haven't wanted to watch, but I'm trying different things so that you can know what the truth is. I want to know what the truth is. So it's for me as much as it is for you. You guys just give me enthusiasm and reason to keep investigating, to keep searching, even when I'm too lazy to do it for myself. So I'm thankful for you guys being here. I'm thankful for you watching these videos. And thank you for supporting the channel. Those of you who have bought t-shirts that I make. And by the way, I would love it if all of you guys who have bought t-shirts from me would go and take some pictures of you wearing those t-shirts, and please email them to me, or you can send them to me through Messenger and the Facebook group, Ferrigno Freedom Facebook group on YouTube, on Facebook, and then or the Ferrigno Freedom Facebook page. So if you don't want to join the group, you can like the page and you can message me there and send me your pictures. I'd love to be able to share some pictures of people with their success stories. Maybe if you've got some before and afters. I would love to be able to put something together for a new outro. Maybe just something that I share one time, maybe something that I share at the end of every video. I don't know. But I would love for you guys to send me some of your pictures wearing some of the shirts you've bought. But again, thank you for the support, because it helps me to be able to spend the time and money to do these things, because I would much rather be goofing off when I'm not working. And that's something that I'm thankful for as well, is you guys give me reason to use my hands, to use my gift of communication, at least the gift that I think the Lord's given me. It's not something that I do on my own. It just comes naturally. But to use these things, these assets that I have, to give something back, to give something of value to other souls out there. and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the financial support of my patrons, and I hope you guys will stick around and check out the patron list at the end of this video. Meanwhile, I got a quick little ad here for you on a product that I use. This is not going to be something that I wouldn't buy for myself. This is something that I use probably on this diet every day. It just depends on which of the affiliates I plug in here at the end. But I would appreciate it if you check it out so that it helps the algorithm too. It finishes all the way to the end, and I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you guys next time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?